Hi, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, How to Pro Bono, Using Pro Bono Partnerships to Maximise Your CLC's Impact. My name's Penny Sullivan. I'm a Capacity Building Lead here at Community Legal Centres, Queensland. We start, as always, with our acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land on which we're holding today's webinar. In Meanjin, Brisbane, they are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. We pay deepest respect to elders past, present and emerging. As this webinar is being viewed by people across Queensland and around Australia, we also pay respect to the traditional owners throughout the country. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the land in Australia and their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We acknowledge the stories, traditions and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and commit to fostering a culture of learning from and working with First Nations peoples in the spirit of reconciliation and access to justice. We extend a warm welcome to any First Nations peoples joining us today. So I'm very pleased to now welcome Robert Reid, who's the Special Counsel and Pro Bono and Community Investment Senior Manager at Minter Ellison, and Sean Zhong, who's a Senior Associate at Clayton Utz, to present today's webinar. Robert and Sean are going to provide an overview of how CLCs can most effectively leverage pro bono legal assistance, including insights about the context for law firms providing this type of assistance, the different models through which CLCs can engage with pro bono legal services, some tips and tricks for successful pro bono projects, and pro bono success stories. We're also going to be joined by a guest on today's webinar, and I'll let Rob and Sean tell you more about this when I hand over to them in a moment. Before I do that, just some quick housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded, and later today or tomorrow I'll send a link for that recording along with a copy of the PowerPoint slides. I've also made the PowerPoint available in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. We do encourage you to ask questions. If you could type your question into the question box on the control panel, we can read your question out. We will hold questions until the end of the presentation, but do feel free to type them in as you think of them. So I'm now going to hand over to Rob and Sean, and I'll talk to you again at the end of the session. Thanks, Rob and Sean.
Thank you very much, Penny, and hi everyone tuning in. Sean and I are sitting together in the dizzying heights of Waterfront Place, situated in Meanjin, Brisbane. We would also like to acknowledge that the Turrbal and Yagara people are the traditional owners of unceded land on which this building sits and where we are talking to you from, and pay respects to elders past and present and any First Nations people who are on the call. So just introducing Sean and I, both full-time pro bono practitioners in our respective firms, but we're not here on this webinar necessarily as Minter Ellison and Clayton Utz, but rather as members of the Queensland Pro Bono Lawyer Network community, and more about that soon. Having said that, we will of course speak a lot from our own experiences, and we acknowledge that our perspective is generally that of the Brisbane office of a large national firm. However, I just want to acknowledge that Leanne Collingburn, who's the pro bono partner at Hobgood Gannon in Brisbane, had significant input into the content of this as well. And we do understand generally from various gatherings of pro bono people how it plays out in Queensland. We wanted to start with the traditional CLCQ webinar poll to find out how many of you have engaged with pro bono, and if not, why not? So I might hand back to CLCQ to run those polls, please.
Great, thanks Rob. I'm going to launch the first question now. So here we go. Here's the question, it's up. Have you utilised pro bono services? If you could please select your answer, yes or no. Lots of responses coming through. We'll just wait another 10 seconds or so for people to get their answers in. Great, looks like we've got most people have responded now. Okay, so we will share the results of that poll. So we've got 79% of people on the call who have utilised pro bono services, 21% who haven't. All right, did you want me to launch the second one, Rob?
Yes, please.
Okay, righto, here we go. The next one. Okay, so the poll is up there for those that haven't engaged pro bono services. Why not? You can select one of the following: too difficult or time consuming, pro bono has not been or will not be helpful, I don't have the right skill set, I'm not sure how to do it, too many conflicts of interest, all of the above. If you did have some additional points you wanted to make, you can just pop them into the chat and I can contribute those answers if you wanted to particularly add something. So we're giving people some time to pop their responses into that. Just another few seconds to allow that to happen. Okay, looks like we have a number of people who voted. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. Okay, so we're just sharing those results. So we've got 33% of people who responded said it was too difficult or too time consuming. 58% said I don't have the right skill set or not sure how to do it. We had 8% who said too many conflicts of interest, but no one said all of the above. And it doesn't look like I've got anyone who wanted to add anything else to that. So there we go. Thanks, Rob. Back to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for responding. That's really useful information. So a lot of you have used pro bono, some of you haven't, and we understand the general reasons why you haven't. Hopefully this morning what we're going to do is to demystify, or if you're not mystified, remind everyone of the value and opportunity that pro bono represents. What we're going to do is hopefully give you some inspiration to engage with or broaden your engagement with pro bono, and we're going to do that by putting it into context, describing the many ways that pro bono can provide support, including some case studies, and you might be surprised to hear the range of ways that pro bono can assist, and give you some tips and a practical takeaway on how to engage with pro bono. We'll also hear the CLC perspective from Sibel from Caxton Legal Centre. So what is this pro bono thing anyway? I mean, despite what people think, pro bono has nothing to do with the lead singer of U2. I can't see anyone and you can't see me, so drop a note in the chat if you laughed at that joke. Hopefully nobody did. It was old and unfunny when it was first told 25 years ago, and I understand that the only musician we're allowed to talk about at the moment is Taylor Swift. What pro bono actually is, it comes from the term, the Latin term pro bono publico, which means for the public good. So essentially what it is legal work that is done by commercial law firms for the public good and done for free, or in some circumstances at a reduced rate, with no expectation of commercial return. There's a number of definitions of pro bono, but the primary definition is the one that the Australian Pro Bono Centre uses, and that adopted the definition from the Law Council of Australia. The gist of the definition is that legal work is pro bono when it is for individuals who can't otherwise access legal assistance without incurring significant financial hardship, or it is for charities, not-for-profits or social enterprises that work in the interests of low-income or disadvantaged members of the community or for the public good, and CLCs would actually fit into that category themselves, or it is a matter that raises an issue of public interest that wouldn't otherwise be pursued. Now, that's a pretty prescriptive definition, but it is flexible. David Hillard, who is the pro bono partner at Clayton Utz, says that after years of experience as a pro bono practitioner, you can actually just smell if something is pro bono or not. Now, the legal profession as a whole has always had an obligation to do this kind of work. For commercial firms in Australia, this has played out in the past as ad hoc community work and individual members of the firms volunteering until around 1999, 2000, when the firms started developing coordinated and strategic programs. And they did that really to ensure the effectiveness of those ad hoc efforts that were going on. So in the past 25 years since that coordination has started to happen, the pro bono community has really grown exponentially in Australia. That's mostly been led out of Sydney and Melbourne, but it has definitely grown in terms of on-the-ground resourcing in Queensland, particularly in Brisbane, and with a growth spurt here over the last probably 5 years or so, I would say. In that 25 years that pro bono has been evolving in Australia, there's been a few significant developments. Firstly, as I've sort of indicated, embedded and full-time resource pro bono practices have grown in many large and mid-tier firms across the country. And we are seeing more and more full-time pro bono management roles based in Brisbane. Sean and I are examples of that. Just to clarify here what a pro bono practice is, it plays out differently in different firms, so this is a generalisation, but you might think that pro bono practice means that there's a group or a practice group within a firm that is solely undertaking direct legal work or pro bono legal work itself, and no one else is involved. While that does happen, there is direct work done within pro bono practice groups. There is a primary responsibility for the pro bono practice to actually find pro bono opportunities that are effective and get them to the right people right around the firm. It really is meant to be diversified. Pro bono practitioners are passionate about access to justice, but so are many, many other lawyers around a commercial law firm. It's just that we got lucky enough to get a full-time role in it, but we can make sure that what our people are doing is needed and effective. Another thing that has occurred over the last 25 years, which is relevant for you to know in this context, is that fee credits were introduced in a lot of firms, and that's to ensure that pro bono is treated like fee-paying work. That's particularly relevant for those lawyers who are undertaking the pro bono work alongside their commercial practices. Getting fee credits means that their utilisation isn't impacted by pro bono work, and they're less likely, therefore, to give undue precedence to fee-paying work. Although reality check, of course, that still happens to varying extents. But the idea is that a pro bono file will look and smell exactly like a fee-paying file. The only thing is that invoices won't go out. There's also been a development of organised gatherings of pro bono practitioners and managers. There's the Australian Community of Pro Bono Lawyers, for example, but locally we've got the Queensland Pro Bono Lawyers Network, which has got really active since probably 2013. Up till then, there were small groups of people that gathered together. Now we have a huge room full of people representing many firms who coordinate the pro bono in those firms. Pro bono is really an area where firms don't compete, they share. And so we talk to each other about success stories, things we've tried, needs that we have ascertained through our partnerships, and pain issues that we experience. Specific pro bono referral organisations like Justice Connect and in Queensland Law Right have been established. A peak body was established, the Australian Pro Bono Centre. With that came the definition I mentioned earlier. With that also came the option for firms to sign up to an aspirational pro bono target, which is 35 hours per lawyer per year. And in that context, there's been a real increased focus by commercial clients on what firms are doing in the community space, and direct reference by government clients, including Queensland Government, to the pro bono target and how a firm is performing against that target. So we're in a position now where firms want to do pro bono, they want to do it, and they want to do it well. They also almost need to do it in some circumstances. They primarily want to do it and do it well because they want to tap into all of the resources they have available to at least in part assist in meeting unmet legal need effectively. And as I said, we've got people employed in the firms to actually find those opportunities and make it happen. So we wouldn't have a job if we weren't looking for pro bono opportunities. It is also important from a recruitment and retention perspective. No point in hiding that. Lawyers heading into commercial practice still innately want to be applying their skills and expertise to help the vulnerable or disadvantaged in our community or the organisations that help them. and firms want to be able to cater for that. But there is also now the added incentive of needing to meet the pro bono hours target, and this is particularly strong when the firm's commercial client or potential client is looking at that. Remembering, of course, that there's always the overlay that the target is linked back to the definition, so it's always going to be work that is for the public good. It's not hours for the sake of hours, but that is certainly an added incentive. So what does this have to do with community legal centres? There's clearly a lot of unmet legal need out there and an inability in the legal assistance sector under current funding and resourcing to meet that demand. Pro Bono is there to help fill the gap. A note here that Pro Bono is not and has never been intended to be a replacement for legal assistance funding. In fact, Pro Bono relies on a properly funded CLC sector. It's a two-way street. While we might provide resources, we need CLCs to make sure that our work is effective, to direct us to the issues and connect us to the clients where our resources are most needed. For all of the reasons I've mentioned, firms are generally and genuinely looking for effective pro bono opportunities. Some are at capacity and can't take on much more at the moment. Others have room to move. Still others are just starting out. But to give you an idea, Leanne Collingburn did some maths estimations which show that if you assume there's 10 firms in Queensland signed up to the pro bono hours target of 35 hours per lawyer, then with an assumed 150 lawyers in each firm, in theory, you have at least 1,093.75 pro bono hours per week, or the equivalent of 27.34 full-time lawyers untied to funding, ready to help deliver your services or help you out organisationally. So why wouldn't you tap into that? If you want to check the calculations on that, I've got them, but if you want to question them, I'll refer you to Leanne because I didn't understand it. So that's the context and background of Pro Bono. Handing over to Sean now to talk about the different types of Pro Bono assistance that are available.
Thank you, Rob. That was an excellent introduction and overview of the Queensland pro bono sector. I hope that's given all of you some context and insight as to why the pro bono sector exists and has grown over the last decade. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about ways that law firms can provide pro bono support to the CLC sector. And after that, Rob and I will share some specific examples of how we've personally been able to help support our CLC partners ourselves. Now, there's a diverse range of ways that law firms can support CLCs. Obviously, the most conventional way, which most of you will be familiar with, is pro bono referrals, where you can refer CLC clients to us for pro bono assistance. As Rob mentioned earlier, private law firms primarily rely on community legal centres for their source for pro bono work. So it's our role to develop pro bono opportunities and to source pro bono referrals. There's several reasons why you may decide to refer a client onto a law firm for pro bono assistance. It could be that you no longer have capacity to assist if the particular matter is particularly time consuming. It could be that a client you've been assisting with is experiencing a legal issue that your organisation does not have expertise in. Or, for example, the client is particularly vulnerable and would benefit from legal representation as opposed to advice only. Another very common way for us to support is to help staff legal advice clinics, where we send our volunteer lawyers to help with appointments. Of course, pro bono support has really evolved over the last 2 decades, and pro bono referral pathways aren't the only way a CLC can utilise pro bono support today. Some other ways that we can support you include supporting you in your ongoing casework. For example, we can attach a volunteer lawyer with you to help a matter that you're running from start to finish. We can assist you with legal research for your casework or for law reform purposes, or even help you prepare community legal education. We can assist you with developing and designing internal systems to help with your day-to-day operations. We can advise CLCs directly on organisational and operational issues, including governance, employment, property matters. We can provide prospects advice and opinions on your ongoing matters if you're deciding whether or not it's a matter you'd like to pursue further to the court stage. We can also connect you with our network of barristers and relevant experts that we have in our day-to-day commercial practice. We can assist you with building referral pathways with other CLCs and support organisations that we work on a day-to-day basis. We can help you prepare policies and develop precedents, and phone a friend assistance, where you can call up specific lawyers with relevant expertise to provide tailored advice in particular matters. And of course, there's also secondment opportunities as well. Rather than just tell you all about the different types of ways that we can assist, Rom and I will just share some real examples of how our practices have been supporting our CLC partners. I'll start with from the Clean Utes end. At Clean Utes, we support several CLCs in their community health justice partnerships, where we attach our volunteer lawyers with the CLC's lawyer to help with the casework. In these scenarios, our lawyers act as volunteer lawyers of the CLC, and advice, correspondence and documents are prepared by our volunteer lawyer, but ultimately settled by the CLC lawyer. This type of arrangement can be quite helpful if you have a particularly high funding target to meet for representation and casework. For example, we support several CLCs who obtained the respected work funding in running employment and sexual harassment matters. Similar to the Community Health Justice Partnership model that I just mentioned, what we do is we attach a volunteer lawyer with a CLC lawyer. They help prepare the complaint forms as well as attend conciliations at the Fair Work Commission or the Human Rights Commission, and just assist with the negotiating an outcome. And really what that means is that with the limited amount of resources and time that our CLC partners have, that's an additional resource that you can use, excuse me, to further your casework. Obviously, we've also advised several CLCs on their corporate governance and leasing matters. We tend to work with the management committees directly for this type of work. And I think one of the things I'd probably say it has been a very useful resource for a lot of our CLC partners is the phone a friend assistance. So sometimes unfamiliar legal areas come up in your ongoing casework and you're not really sure about the approach. Rather than spending time researching or finding out what the answer is, you can reach out to us and we can pair you up with a lawyer within our firm that has the relevant expertise to give you advice on the issue. To give you an example, we've had a few queries from CLCs about lodging a caveat. It's something that a lot of our CLC partners do not have expertise or wouldn't ordinarily do, but because to protect their clients' interest in the property, they're thinking about it. And so we connected them with our property team to have a discussion about what the process is like and what to consider. Another query that came up just the other day was a PPSA and bailment issue, which we then connected the CLC lawyer with our banking and finance team to chat about that, to then help provide the best advice for our clients possible. I might just throw it to Rob to share a bit more about the ways that he's been working with the sector.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So similar to Sean, we are involved in the CHJP. We actually get involved in a large number of those CLCs with any law reform that they might be wanting to look at. Often that's background research, just to provide those resources to be able to do literature reviews and things of that kind. So that might be responding to something really quickly and us helping with that. It might even be just some change that a CLC wants to make but just never has time to get to it. We do casework as well. We've had great examples of co-counselling with CLCs where we share each other's expertise. That is the CLC providing us with the effective communication channel to the clients, us providing the resources to take a matter to trial and bring on counsel. We tend to form broad partnerships with CLCs and other community organisations, and just to look for ways to assist them or their clients through the broad range of resources that we have, legal and not legal, as in non-legal, like our non-lawyers, our consultants, our physical resources. Just as an example of how that plays out, Kylie from Rails has given me the okay to talk about, as an example, a long and strong relationship we have with them. And that's led to us developing a few effective projects which take into account organisational and expertise constraints on both sides, as well as our key focus areas. So just briefly, we've got an immigration team, which is quite unusual in large firms, but that means we can provide direct assistance to clients with advice on visa options which aren't core to Rails expertise. Then Rails can provide our lawyers outside the immigration team with expertise and supervision to be part of a clinic assisting people on partner visas escaping domestic violence. So a sharing of expertise there and resources. We provide advice in our areas of expertise to Rails itself. So most recently, a review of their new lease. We even host and cater gatherings for their staff. Importantly, what we were able to do because of this was activate easily to help Rails respond to the Afghan crisis, with our immigration and other lawyers volunteering at the crisis clinics, providing seed funding along with other firms to develop a clinic for the ongoing work. And importantly, and this is something you might think about, we were able to actually help develop the systems and the templates for the clinic, including by seconding one of our lawyers a day a week to assist with implementation, and then get a panel of lawyers from across Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne to volunteer at those clinics. But our assistance to develop that clinic meant that other firms could also get on board. So it was a real capacity building exercise for Rails and the firms to help respond to that particular crisis. So that's just an example of how it can play out, and probably a nice segue into the next part of the presentation.
So when we talk about how a firm will decide whether or not it can help, obviously some of you already brought up conflicts is a big concern for us. Obviously, we would run our usual channels of conflict checks just to make sure that a request that you're asking us to help with isn't actually in conflict with one of our commercial clients' interests. So that's generally the main reason why we would decline requests for assistance. Obviously, there's also capacity issues as well, and you know, the firms can sometimes be very busy, and we work with our commercial lawyers and our colleagues in the commercial teams to really develop capacity. So sometimes it could be that across the December and January period, where commercial work tends to be a bit more quiet, that's when we actually we allocate a lot of matters to our colleagues in the commercial teams, for example, and obviously areas of expertise as well. So I would sort of definitely suggest that when you're thinking about which firm to approach to request for pro bono assistance, I think it's very useful for you to decide who to approach for the particular type of request. So for example, some law firms have carved out specific focus areas to prioritise. So for example, Leanne Collingwood at Hopwood Gannon, their practice focuses on acting for First Nations communities and people navigating environmental disasters and individuals experiencing domestic and family violence. What this means is that if you have a matter where you are acting for a First Nations client experiencing DV and would like to refer the matter out so that the client can obtain pro bono legal representation, Hopwood Gannon would be a really good choice because of their focus areas, and they would be more likely to take the matter on as well. Other firms such as Clay Newts, we do not have designated areas of focus. Instead, our practice has always been focused on access to justice, where we act for disadvantaged individuals who cannot obtain legal aid. So as our strategy is much broader, it does mean that we can act in a variety of different matters subject to conflicts and the relevant area of expertise. So obviously areas of expertise is very important to note because not every firm practices in the same area. For example, we do not have family law expertise. So if you want to refer a client out for family law assistance, you would have to reach out to a law firm that has that area of expertise. And I think this is, again, probably going the extra mile is if you do find out more about who the law firm is and who they act for, it can really help in terms of you tailoring which firm to reach out to. For example, if the law firm acts for government clients, it's unlikely that they can take on matters where government's on the other side due to conflicts. However, we as pro bono practitioners often work with our firms to manage conflict issues. So even if you do have a matter where you're not sure of, I would suggest just reaching out and asking us and understanding the different processes for each individual firm so you can decide on the specific firms you reach out to for particular matters. And finally, something to really think about is some pro bono practices are more evolved and established than others. So some firms have dedicated pro bono practitioners such as Rob and myself, others don't. Instead, they may have a commercial lawyer taking on a part-time role of pro bono coordinator. What this means is that it does impact on the types of work a firm can take on. For example, in addition to ongoing pro bono casework that I do, I also support our lawyers that in their pro bono casework. And this does mean that there's more capacity for our firm to take on matters directly through direct referrals. So we do a lot of work in elder abuse, victims compensation and employment. And because that's our day-to-day bread and butter, I'm able to actually support our lawyers in that casework. Whereas other firms, like smaller firms without dedicated pro bono practitioners, may prefer to support in more discrete ways, such as helping with legal research or law reform matters, instead of taking on direct referrals, which can be more time consuming, and potentially they do not have the level of support from the firm to be able to help run those matters. And Rob, I think may want to share a point or two about just relationship building in general.
Yeah, so I deliberately moved forward to the how do you tap into pro bono part, because while Sean was talking to some of the constraints that pro bono firms have, it's also very relevant in terms of how do you then tap into pro bono, because understanding those constraints means looking at different pro bono teams and strategies and working out where you should go. I should say that if you can't work that out, that can be okay too, because of that community that we have. We can often talk amongst ourselves to get a matter to the right place as well. And there's also the Law Right Pro Bono Connect service available. But if you wanted to go further than placing a particular matter, you might want to think about forming an ongoing relationship with a firm or firms. And I kind of alluded to that in my example around Rails. I think forming that broader and longer term relationship works really well for a few reasons. You form a working relationship, it can develop where you understand what the firm can and can't do. So all those things Sean just spoke about, and the firm understands how you operate and what your pain points are. And that makes for a really much more efficient and flexible referral or request process in the long run. As the relationship grows, you keep each other up to date on your respective organisations and the issues impacting your community and clients. You can openly discuss what's working and what isn't, what's needed and no longer needed, and therefore you can adapt or abandon projects accordingly, introduce new ones. The firm's going to better work with you to ensure that the assistance they're providing is not actually more of a drain on your resources than a saving of resources. We want to make sure that we're not making your situation worse by butting in. We want to talk to you to make sure that the project we're working on is feasible for all of us. And you can look at flexible ways of approaching things to overcome some of the barriers that Sean mentioned earlier, and do that in a way that's useful to you and comfortable for the firm. It gives you that comfortable point of contact in the form of the pro bono manager, and that pro bono manager can then follow up any particular work that's not being progressed within the firm. If it's fallen through the cracks or whatever reason, they can follow up for you. And it potentially gives rise to a broader relationship that can tap into a whole range of resources that you wouldn't even imagine you could call on. We've had some really interesting solutions that have involved a range of resources, including our tech consultants, even our kitchen at times, to help some solutions, to find some solutions to some pain points for some of the CLCs and their clients. Some tips for how to form and maintain a long-term pro bono relationship. I guess just reach out to a firm or respond when one reaches out to you, taking into consideration those things that Sean raised. So looking for a firm that in your area, geographically, focus area-wise, expertise-wise. Approach the pro bono manager if they have one. You can usually find that out on the website. If you don't know where to start looking, after this session, CLCQ is going to send through some contact cards, which will guide you to some of the Queensland Pro Bono Lawyer Network firms, and it has a bit of information about each firm there. Note that this is for CLCs only, not clients, so keep it within the CLC, keep it within your CLCs. And noting also that there's a lot of pro bono resources concentrated in Brisbane, and the card will reflect that. But if you are a CLC in a rural, regional, remote area, it's still potentially worth contacting some of those firms. We are seeing a growing focus in Brisbane in reaching out to RRR areas, and some really successful partnerships and projects being developed, and a lot of work going on to try and build the pro bono response to those areas. A lot of tips around you know, not expecting too much in your first meeting, just get to know each other. You don't always have to come out with a concrete project to work on. It's really just for the firms and you to understand each other, and then your pain points, possible solutions, they will come out with as the relationship develops. So have a few formal meetings, maybe a couple a year, but just generally leave the communication channel open so that you both know that you can get in touch at any time when you have an idea or need something done. And always give feedback and share success stories, because the lawyers at the firms love to see that the work that they've done has had a positive impact. That's why they do it. That all sounds like a lot of work, and that was one of the things that people mentioned, taking up time. It shouldn't have to be, though. The firm will work with you on that, and you can tailor your approach in terms of how many and which firms you reach out to, how big the relationship is. Just has those advantages that I mentioned. But if you do find the right relationship, then I reckon it will just, the time you put into it is worth the investment in the long run. But that's all of this is just what Sean and I say. We would like Sibel to give us her words of wisdom in terms of the CLC perspective on pro bono and tapping into it. Over to you, Sibel.
Thanks, Rob. Sibel here from Caxton Legal Centre. I'm the CEO here, and I'm coming here from Yagara and Turrbal lands, which were never ceded. I wanted to give the perspective from a CLC who does a lot of engagement to secure pro bono work and supports from firms, barristers, and outside the legal profession as well. But I'm just going to focus on the legal sector, of course, which is what we're talking about today. I wanted to start by saying that pro bono supports can be so significant, and we know in our organisation that we have about 11,000 hours per annum worth of pro bono supports coming through to Caxton and its clients, and we've costed that out at the cheap rate of $150 an hour. And that means that to us, it's a value of about $1.65 million. We also know that this is a really conservative figure, and it is highly likely that whatever dollar we get in funding, we also generate an extra dollar in pro bono supports. So I really want to encourage you to see the value of making some time to form those pro bono relationships. I also wanted to say that it's okay to interchange the terms of pro bono and volunteering. Sometimes, you know, people are more comfortable in thinking about volunteering, and that's okay in this sector to think that way also. There's some distinction, but not really when we're just talking about getting those services in for our clients and for our organisation. I wanted to also say that the time and effort involved in organising pro bono supports for your CLC and for your clients really outweighs the benefits. And I've done this over many years now and put time and effort into it, blocked out some time in the calendar to meet with people and to talk about how to develop those pro bono relationships, or how to maintain them, or how to improve them. And that is so little time in the long run when compared to the benefit that flows through to the centre and to clients. There is a real other advantage for having pro bono relationships, and that is that it sets you up for a stronger tender for funding. It enables you to talk about how your funding can stretch further. And the other thing that I wanted to say before I kind of move on to more of the nuts and bolts of how to do it well is that I've found that pro bono firms are always there when your capacity to engage with them fluctuates. So sometimes we're super busy and I just can't progress something and I can't have another chat, or I can't take that conversation further, can't do that meeting. And we do talk about what we might do to increase our pro bono opportunities together, and I just can't get that done. But I always find that when I go back again, that the firms are still there, they're enduring, and they're always ready to help. So if you had to close the door for a little while, or you just had to put it in the car park for a while, I would just encourage you to take it back up again and feel okay about the fact that, you know, your capacity to engage will fluctuate from time to time, but the firms are always there to provide that support. So just to outline how we go about doing pro bono partnering at Caxton, we basically link it back firstly to what our strategic plan is and some of the priority goals. So I'd encourage you to go back to your strategic plan, or include it in your strategic planning about how you want to have some goals around including pro bono volunteer supports as part of the way that you do your work. And normally through that process, you'll identify some goals around that. And you might also develop a volunteer or pro bono strategy if you've got time. Look, we don't even have one. We kind of have a draft one, but we certainly have some priority goals. So I'll give you an example. One of the goals of Caxton has always been to increase the amount of consumer credit and debt services available to people throughout Queensland, because we don't have like a financial rights service like they do in other states and territories. So we knew that we would have to do that with pro bono supports. So we set about a plan in order to do that. So that identified a clear goal and why we might be approaching firms for those pro bono supports. It's always important then, if you've got some goals, whatever they may be, whatever your organisation needs, so good to kind of really analyse what you need. It's also good to analyse what internal resourcing you will have for that, because sometimes it takes a bit of coordination. You've got to talk about in-house who's going to manage those relationships. Is it going to be the CEO, the director, the staff, the direct staff? And that's kind of important to set up a bit so that everybody knows who's talking to who. And then also, you know, think about how you're going to supervise some of that work if it's, for example, a clinic. And then that sets you up to think about, well, what would be the best ways that our service or our centre can get those pro bono supports. Would it be that you want to create a relationship with firms for ongoing pro bono supports? So for example, where you can always, in distinct areas of law, phone a friend or refer clients holus bolus, or to do a particular strategic project, or whether it's to do some CLE, and to write that down on a piece of paper, all of those ways that you want to have that ongoing relationship. So kind of like writing down a bit of a wish list for your centre and for your clients, and how that will benefit the centre and your clients. And then to also think about what other kind of models of pro bono support might work well for your centre. So whether that's an advice clinic that either is done in the daytime or the nighttime, how you might go about rostering that, whether it's in person, whether it's online, and what you would need to support that if it was going to be online, and just your capacity to administer that kind of a clinic. You might be thinking about secondment arrangements. A lot of the firms these days are interested in rotating some of their graduate lawyers through a CLC, and you might be able to make an arrangement for secondments in your CLC. So for example, in Caxton, we have I think about 6 secondment arrangements now, where graduate lawyers rotate into Caxton and they stay with us either for 2 days. We do a minimum of 2 days a week over 8 weeks, because otherwise we find it's too difficult to induct. We need to kind of have that minimum amount of time. Or sometimes we have a secondment arrangement where somebody is working in Caxton full-time for up to 6 months. Also, there's a different type of secondment arrangement, which Sean was talking about, where the firm and lawyers in the firm are seconded to a clinic, and then they provide advice and casework under the CLC's, basically our PII insurance, and we supervise and tick it off, but we also get to count the deliverables on that. And then it's really important not to forget the opportunity to engage with barristers. So we instruct a lot of barristers pro bono, and there are a lot of barristers who want to support the pro bono work of centres. They just need to know that they've got a reliable instructing solicitor, that the matter's been well triaged for the type of case that's going to be run. And also there's often opportunity to see if there is legal aid available and apply for that for a barrister. But if there isn't, then there is also an opportunity to have an arrangement with them, with a cost agreement with your client and with the barrister, that if you're running that matter, that pro bono can actually turn into paid if you get a costs order. And we routinely do get costs orders. So that can help encourage some pro bono supports as well. But we find that the bar are very good at putting their hand up to assist, more so in Brisbane, I do appreciate, and there's limited opportunities when we get more up north and out west. But on the whole, I think it's good to not forget that the bar also make themselves available. After you've assessed internally what are the kind of best models that would support your the pro bono work that you would like to engage with, whether it's, like I said, an ongoing pro bono relationship with a firm, whether it's like a clinic, a secondment, whether it's with barristers, for example. Then you do have to spend some time on that partnership development. It's kind of silly to think that you can develop a pro bono partnership with people without actually doing some work on that pro bono partnership. So there is a stage where you do need to be thinking about who you want to talk to, and as Rob has already mentioned, often with some of the firms there is somebody to contact distinctly. In some of the other firms there isn't, and as a matter of fact they're new at pro bono, so it's about working with them to talk about what pro bono can look like for them, because they may be after some guidance around how to do pro bono work in their organisation. And also remembering that today, as Rob has already and Sean have already indicated, it has more of a sense of an equal partnership, because we are coordinating and facilitating those pro bono KPIs, and also promoting those great workplaces that firms are wanting to put out there for their recruitment and retention. So it does have a feeling, and I always get this feeling now more so, that it is a partnership of equals. So I think that you can feel confident to reach out under that kind of with that sort of sway. So, like I said, for that partnership development stage, you really need to think about who's going to be responsible for developing those relationships. So it might be your CEO, it might be your director, it might be a senior staff member. And then maybe once that's kind of negotiated, the relationship is bedded down, you'd be thinking about who else in the centre you might hand off that relationship to, or alternatively, they build that then more directly once that it's understood what type of pro bono work is going to be done. Also, it's really good to try and understand what strategic alignment certain firms might have. And it was mentioned either by Sean or Rob, I can't remember, that, for example, at Hopgood Gannon, they have a particular focus area. And so it's good just to do a little bit of Googling on the firms and see how they operate. I've come to know, and I kind of record it in a Excel spreadsheet, giving away some of my hot tips here, but I do record what I've come to know about the firms and their strategic focus and the way that they work with Caxton, and that's really helpful to keep those notes, and I call it a partnership register. You can call it what you like, your Excel spreadsheet. And you just kind of keep some notes on that as to those key people, what the scope of pro bono work is likely to be able to be done, and it's good to negotiate that well with each of the firms. And then just note down some things about the strategic priorities. So I always ask a firm, do you have particular strategic priorities, if I can't Google that and find that out. And then I think it's important sometimes, depending upon what pro bono support you want, to develop the case for that. So when we wanted to go to various firms about developing a consumer credit and debt volunteer clinic, we basically formed up a 2-page brief that said, look, this is the unmet legal need in Queensland. This is the type of model that we'd be envisaging. This is the way we think that we can coordinate this type of clinic, and now we really want to know from you how that might work. You know, should it be in the day? Should it be in the afternoon? Should it be at night time? How many people? Do you need training? We can provide training and supports. Are there resources that we need? And you know, just talking about how to develop that particular model. So I call that kind of developing the case for what you want to do, and then also do very well at defending how you're going to triage the right clients into that type of clinic or whatever model you want to develop. And then you just got to meet and negotiate and talk about some of the sticky issues like conflicts and what level the firm is up to around, you know, whether they're really conservative about that or whether they can kind of maneuver if they understand a bit more. And I find that, like, I have those conversations all the time, and I think it's really important to know that those conversations are welcomed and they're important, so that, you know, whatever pro bono work you're going to do together works well. And then formalization. So a lot of the firms these days have their own templates that they would like to be signed up, and they have that for their own reasons because they're trying to record their pro bono targets. And that's okay. Some of the templates are getting a little heavy, and I'm kind of doing a little bit of a pushback on that at the moment, but that's on another point. But most of them are really user-friendly. So you might just have a 2-page secondment agreement that just records some essentials like, you know, the person's not the CLC's employee, we're not going to pinch the person for 6 months, that kind of stuff. So it's important to formalise it. It just gives it a little bit more credibility and a bit more weight. And then also you can put that in your funding tenders that you have a formal partnership with that particular firm. And then you just deliver it and then do a lot of checking in. And as Rob said, sharing those success stories. Yeah, that's about it. And also I just wanted to put out there, I'm really happy to act as a sounding board for any CLC who's trying this out for the first time. So you could give me a call anytime.
Thank you so much for that insight, Sibel. That's awesome. And you mentioned volunteering and pro bono and the distinction, and actually that's another use for pro bono. If you go to a firm and get them organising and managing their own roster of volunteers to send to you, then that takes a bit of the pain out for you. But look, I know I am going to eat a little bit into, probably a lot into question time here, but before we wrap up, and this is an ongoing conversation, this is just the start to give you the context. We do just want to ask a few more questions, poll questions about your experience with pro bono. And we will probably take that to the Pro Bono Lawyers Network and continue the conversation from there. So would you mind quickly running those polls, please?
Sure, Rob, no problems at all. And just to say that we are happy just to roll over a little bit after the hour. We've got a few questions that have come through. So if people are interested in staying on the line and that suits you guys, we can do that as well. So just we can look at that once the polls are finished. Okay, so I'm going to launch the next poll now. So this one asks, if you have engaged pro bono services, how would you rate your overall experience? Positive, negative, or neutral? So if we could have people jumping in to give us your responses, that would be great. We're going to give it another 10 seconds or so to give as many people as possible a chance. Numbers are going up. We've got about half of our attendees so far. Just another little bit of time. Okay, we'll finish off in about 5 seconds. Okay, so we'll have a look at the results of that poll. So we've got 76% of respondents have said they've had a positive experience, 3% are negative, and 21% are neutral. So shall I just roll straight into the next one, Rob?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the next one is, if your experiences have been positive, why was this? Lawyers were easy to deal with, professional and high quality service, work was delivered on time to meet deadlines or requirements, the work met the brief well, or all of the above. And if you wanted to say something else, you can just pop a note in the question box or the chat. So we'll give you a little bit of time to respond to that. Responses coming in. We've got about 40% of people voted so far, so we'll give another 10 seconds or so to get your responses in. Okay, we'll close in about 3 or 4 seconds. Okay, let's have a look at the results. So we've got 12% saying lawyers were easy to deal with, 16% saying they were professional and high quality service, 6% saying work was delivered to meet requirements, 10% said the work met the brief well, and 56% said all of the above, which is a nice outcome. All right, so we'll do the last poll now, which is asking, if your experiences have been negative, why was this? Lawyers were difficult to deal with or not responsive. The work wasn't delivered in a timely way, not the level of professionalism I was expecting. The delivered work didn't meet the brief or wasn't what I needed, or all of the above. So we'll give a bit of time for people to respond. It's taking people a little bit longer this time because they need to think about these options, I think. So we've got about 18% of participants who've voted so far, so we'll give another 10 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to close in another couple of seconds, so hurry to get those responses in. Okay, we'll close that off now. All right, so responses there, 14% said the lawyers were difficult to deal with or not responsive. 41% said the work wasn't delivered in a timely way. 9% is not the level of professionalism I was expecting. 27% said the delivered work didn't meet the brief or wasn't what I needed. And 9% said all of the above. Okay, and I think that was the last one, Rob, is that right?
That's right. Thank you so much. And that's really useful and actually quite positive as well, which is really nice. But like I said, really useful feedback. We want to take that generally away with us to the network and continue this conversation with you collectively and individually, bearing in mind what you've told us and what you've heard this morning. But for now, we're hoping that the background we've provided has given you some refreshed context around what Pro Bono is, why it's there and what it can do. Our takeaway message, subject to questions, is that we suggest that you keep front of mind the fact that this Pro Bono resource is out there and it's available to you. If you are facing an issue organisationally or with one of your clients, have Pro Bono in your list of possible solutions, and ideally start talking with some of the Pro Bono managers out there at a broader level. as I mentioned, CLCQ will send around those contact cards if you need any guidance on who to contact. But yeah, we really do encourage you to get on board or stay on board the good ship Pro Bono.
Great.
Did we have any
Thanks, Rob.
time for that?
Yeah, we do have some questions, and I'm happy to keep the webinar running so we can work our way through those as long as you guys have got the time to do that. We've still got a lot of people who are staying on the line, so I think we can do a little bit of time on that. I would just say before we start with the CLC contact card, if you've registered with an email address that isn't a CLC identifying email address, but you're with a CLC, you'll need to email me directly, penny@communitylegalqrd.au, and let me know and identify the CLC that you're with and how we verify that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so moving on to questions and comments. So Sadie said that she did think it was a nice joke, Rob, and it did make her smile. That was about the joke about Bono. Moving on to a question from Liz. She asks, in your experience, would you say that your pro bono support of your firms is in the shape of client assistance work or rather institutional governance assistance for the centre staff itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like I indicated, that plays out differently in different firms. It's one of the things you need to look at. Some will focus more on one or the other. For Minters, it's a very broad range. So we do the individual work, whether through clinics as volunteers of the CLC or as Minters when it fits our expertise. We also do a lot of the organisational and a lot of law reform. But other practices are different and focus differently. Sean?
Yeah, so at Play Newts, we have a focus on acting for disadvantaged individuals. So we have a target ourselves that we set that at least a percentage of our pro bono work is done for individuals. But having said that, we also do a lot of not-for-profit governance type of work as well, whether for a CLC or a different type of charity. I'd say in the last few financial years, I think 60% of our work in the Brisbane office is done for individuals and the rest of it is done for not-for-profits.
Yeah, so it does vary on focus areas, but yeah, like Sean indicated, while a firm might have a particular focus, they will generally look to all areas of pro bono assistance. It's just whether they prioritize one over the other.
Great, thank you both. It's really helpful to know. So the next is just a comment. It's from Kylie at Rails, who has said, thanks Rob and Minters for the incredible partnership. She's also happy to meet with any CLC colleagues looking to move into pro bono to talk through how to start. If you'd like Kylie's contact details, just email me again. This one is from Michelle, who said, we in WA would love to meet the pro bono team in Perth Minters and Clayton Utes. If you could hook us up, please. So maybe, guys, if you want to send through some contact details for your WA colleagues, I'm happy to get back to Michelle about that.
Yes.
The next question comes from Mel, saying we've got some great pro bono partnerships here at ICLC in New South Wales, but wondering how you manage secondees that come in for 4 weeks. We want to have them longer before they move on so we don't spend a quarter of each person's time during the training and they just get comfortable giving advice and leave. How do we broach the cost outweighing the benefit for them and us?
That's a really good question, and that identifies a whole lot of tensions around the pro bono secondment situation. I think most firms are very conscious of not wanting to make more of a problem than a benefit in providing a secondment, and should always talk to the CLC around, you know, what is the minimum period of time that will work with you without eating into your resources too much, like the example just given where you're spending more time inducting than getting a benefit from a person. That conversation should always happen, and if it doesn't, you should instigate that conversation, and it may turn out that the firm actually can't deliver on what you actually need. That just has to be the conversation that occurs, because also from the firm side, secondments are certainly great for the for the pro bono hour target, definitely. Also, just for the effectiveness of them, it really embeds our people into the world of the community legal centre, and they really can understand issues way more deeply and bring that back to the firm for the ongoing work. But there is always, with any secondment, pro bono or otherwise, a tension around being able to pull someone out of their commercial practice for a sufficient period of time to make a difference. So I don't know the specific answers to that, other than to have the conversation and to try and work out an arrangement that is going to work for both parties. I don't know, did you have anything?
Not from my end. That was all I could think of as well. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I just wanted to mention that Sibel had just put a note in response to that question as well, just reiterating from a CLC's perspective that it is about your centre's needs, and that Caxton explains what their requirements are and negotiates with pro bono firms around that. So good advice there from Sibel. And also Mel had commented that lawyers at advice clinics have been really engaged and interested, as the work is quite different to what they normally do. And Sibel's also suggested a volunteer survey each year where people can tell them about getting different areas of law and the different experiences that they like to have. So that's really useful as well. All of the other comments look like they are in deep appreciation of the presentation. Thanks a lot to Rob and Sean, I think is the gist of those comments, and to Sibel as well. So there's finally just a comment here that from Rose to say, LawRight is always happy to help CLCs with referrals to pro bono partners or to discuss how we refer matters to help CLCs with their referral processes. Feel free to get in touch with the Pro Bono Connect team at LawRight. And a big thanks to Rob and Sean for the presentation. So I think that probably brings us to the end of those questions and comments. Rob and Sean, is there anything else that you wanted to say at this point?
No, that's all good. We really enjoyed speaking with you all. I'm glad you appreciated the joke, and hopefully we can continue our conversations moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this would be a session that we could rerun, on a semi-regular basis, because I think there's been a huge level of interest and engagement from everyone in terms of the subject area and the fantastic information you've been able to provide. So huge thank you from us, not only for today's presentation, but for everything that you and the rest of the pro bono firms do to support the work of our CLCs. It is deeply appreciated. To everyone who joined the session today, a big thanks for being here, and for those of you who were able to hang around for the questions, thank you for doing that. Before you go, just a reminder to complete the feedback survey that'll pop up on your screen once the webinar is closed. Your feedback really does help us to continually improve our webinar program. So that's it from us for now. We hope to see you at the next CLCQ webinar, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.